Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Ninja Boy, brought to us by Culture Brain. Ninja Boy is part of the Super Chinese series, which also includes games such as Kung Fu Heroes and Little Ninja Brothers. Ninja Boy is pretty much a pseudo-sequel to Kung Fu Heroes, using the same formula that game did in order for you to get through it, featuring 8 different worlds with 4 levels in each. So here we go with Ninja Boy for the Nintendo Game Boy. Not much of a startup screen, you just have the title with a press start and your high score, and then when you hit the start button you'll jump to the world map, getting to see the entire world map layout, before jumping into World 1-1. In Ninja Boy, your goal is to defeat a certain number of enemies per screen in order to open up the gate at the top and move on to the next level. In Kung Fu Heroes, you could see the entire screen on screen at one given time. However, due to the limitations of the Game Boy, you can only see a part of the screen at a given time. There are arrows on the left and right sides in most of the stages in the game, and when you go through these will either take you to the bottom of the screen, to the arrow on the opposite side, or just to the opposite side of the screen. It all depends on where the 2 arrows are laid out, and you can use these arrows to help you out and be able to avoid certain enemies. As far as attacking enemies in the game goes, you have a few different methods. You can of course straight up punch them, you can jump on top of enemies, which you'll have to do to certain types, as well as you'll get a sword later on. There's a few other power-ups, including a number 2 shuriken and a number 4 shuriken. The number 2 just throws them straight out, while the number 4 will send them all bouncing everywhere. There are plenty of other random items to pick up, such as letter E's, that after collecting 4 of them will get you a 1-up, as well as you can also pick up the Mighty Kicks, which give you a more advanced jump attack. You also level up your character's attack, and this is what is essential. You'll see it in the lower right corner, right next to the fist icon is a number 0 currently. You'll have to level up your attack slowly by collecting the different items and defeating enemies in order to defeat the stronger enemies later on. If you don't have enough strength, you won't be able to even damage some enemies, and because of this, can actually get you to the final boss of the game and you won't be able to actually defeat him. The game has a one-hit death, but you appear immediately back on the same screen, and all the enemies you had defeated up to the point of your death are still gone. This even includes when you get to boss battles and deal damage to them. They'll actually maintain that damage every time you lose a life, so you can lose 3 or 4 lives and still defeat a boss. One of the worst parts about the game is the giant creature here. This guy shows up randomly on different screens, and when he does show up, you'll pretty much have to run away for a few seconds, avoid him, until eventually he'll leave and then the normal enemies will return. There are many different enemy types throughout the game you'll be seeing, including these big guys that you'll want to make sure you're not standing directly in front of, because they will end up trying to spear you. You have these little block guys that walk around and they'll latch onto you, slowing you down. While not killing you, they slow you down to the point that other enemies may be able to run into you and kill you. There's a few enemies in the games like that are just more of a hindrance than actually being able to stop you. The most common enemies are the guys with the little horns on their head. Their main form of attack and their variations do flip jumps towards you. When you're facing one directly head-on and walking towards them, he'll usually start flipping, so you want to backtrack a little bit and try to get at him from a different direction, like attacking him from above if he's facing left or right. That way you have a better advantage of being able to land a hit before he either walks into you or flips directly into you. You also have a few enemies with projectiles, such as the guys with the giant bazookas. While their fire isn't too fast, you want to make sure, of course, you're not standing directly in the line of fire when they do fire out. One of the other weird enemies is a little disc with the mouths on them. When you do a jump kick on them, they're instantly defeated, so you don't want to accidentally step on top of them, as they will take a life. There's only a handful of enemies, though, over the course of the entire 8 worlds, but they definitely have variations and get tougher as you go. Another annoying enemy are these guys right here. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but basically when they hit you with their attack, you get frozen in a giant, cocoons-like setting for a few seconds, of course allowing other enemies to kill you, however, they won't be able to. They also are very strong, so we can't even take them out at the moment. There's a good example of when you end up becoming that mummified statue for that period of time. Having different items such as the shoes, like I currently have, allow you to walk over water. There's a few power-ups and other random items you can find located inside of different stones. You can see the current items I have at the bottom of the screen. And to be honest, I'm not sure what all of the individual items actually end up doing for me. Though of course I do know what the shoes do, and also the sword item that we'll be getting a little bit later on. The sword is pretty much essential to be able to complete the game, as some enemies can only be damaged by the sword, including the 2 boss fights of the game. Overall though, the game has a pretty simple concept of just having you destroy endless amounts of monsters until eventually the gate does open up. The exact set of enemies you have to defeat I'm not positive always on, as it seems sometimes to fluctuate on me, but the goal for each one is the same. And that even includes the final boss. Defeating him, you'll still have to walk through the gate at the end. This level is kind of a mini-boss type setting, as you'll have to battle clones of yourself, or at least other ninjas that look exactly like you. The first times you'll have to hit them multiple times, but then you'll see that a few of them end up taking only a single hit to end up being destroyed, either using the punch or the jump attack in order to hit them. They work pretty much like the normal horned enemies, doing their flip attacks as well as straight punches. Just be sure not to walk directly into their line of attack. In case you can't hear the extremely annoying beeping sound once you have defeated enough enemies to open the gate, and you currently aren't seeing the gate on screen, you'll notice that all enemies do increase in speed once the gate is open. So that's another tall tale sign that you can move on to the next level. There's also some levels that contain items that will instantly unlock the door, and I'll use a couple of them in the game. These guys are basically advanced versions of the horn guys, using the flips and straight punches in order to hit you. And since I haven't leveled up yet, it takes 3 hits in order for me to defeat them at the current moment. The special items in the game are set to their locations, so they're always going to appear in the same levels and in the same spots. The other items, such as the E buttons or the M money and stuff like that, those are randomly placed throughout. When it comes to the things that you hit, like the barrels and all, in order to get those items, you'll sometimes notice that you'll actually punch them and send them flying, in which case it can actually destroy enemies, as well as sometimes they'll just flat out explode on you. Now there are bonus rooms in warps in the game. You'll notice sometimes I'll pick up a key item and then a staircase will appear for a short period of time. Eventually it will disappear if you don't go down it. Here's an example of me getting the shuriken item, the number 2 one that sends out a 3-shot spread shot, which is a pretty damaging move and takes out most enemies in the game as long as one of the shurikens hit them. As far as the bonus rooms go, they're either a warp zone, which will take you to a later level in the game, including one at the very end of the game, which can take you back to any previous level in the game except move you forward to the final boss. You'll also have ones that are a take a break room, where you just literally sit there and take a break for 30 seconds, and then the classic standard bonus room where you run around for 30 seconds and actually pick up items. As soon as we start 3-4 though, we're immediately bombarded with the giant monsters, so try to do your best to avoid them using the arrows to your advantage. Always getting him close to one side of the screen before going through the arrows that appear on the opposite side. Other than that, 3-4 is a pretty standard stage. There is the first instance of the water, or maybe lava, throwing rocks at you, so be careful of that. Later levels will actually have bunches of these all on the screen at the same time. And the worst thing will be is you'll end up getting hit by one of those while trying to just avoid a standard enemy because you didn't even realize it was about to fire out at you. There are a few types of floating enemies as well. The cactus-like ones that you can just punch and they'll start bouncing all around the screen, as well as they'll have these black spike ones we'll see later on. In this level, I'm able to get a hold of the 4 shuriken, which as you can see sends out a bunch of shurikens that start bouncing all around the room, taking out any enemy that may get into its path. At this point, we do have the sword item, but I don't need it until 4-4. To use the sword at a given time, you'll have to hold down and press A and B together. Sometimes this doesn't actually work and you'll just end up jumping. So usually I try to hold down and hit them both at the same time a few times until eventually the sword does come out for me. Picking up the shurikens, I'm able to take out most of the normal enemies, but I still have to be very careful of the giant monster. The shurikens only last for a short period of time and won't really even help me against this guy. Once the big guy disappears, we'll be back to fighting the normal guys. You can launch out the boxes at those guys who throw out the lightning bolts. For some reason on this particular level, the big monster likes to appear multiple times in pretty short succession. So be aware of that and be able to get to one of the arrows quickly when he does appear. And because of his appearances, it may take a bit for you to be able to eventually open up that gate to get out. In level 4-3, we'll be fighting more of those box-like enemies that are going to come at us, as well as the floating cactuses. Another new enemy is introduced here, the giant demon-like heads that appear. They float around and shoot projectiles out at you. Of course, the projectiles hit you, you'll end up losing a life. Thankfully though, our fist is powerful enough to blow through most of the enemies and move on. "4-4 is the first of the boss fights, so we're going to get out the sword. Remember, you'll have to hit down and A and B at the same time in order to pull it out. Fight a series of normal enemies for a bit. Eventually they will disappear and you'll actually be able to face off with the boss for the level. The bosses are these four-armed things that move back and forth, but a few quick hits from your sword will easily destroy them, and you can go through the gate and move on to 5-1. I do like the fact that level 5 changes up the scenery a little bit, having us more at a deserted island-like scene. For 5-1 though, we're going to break open a box in the top right corner, getting ourselves the item that instantly opens up the gate. Be very careful, as there's enemies that will pop out of holes in the ground. These guys we won't be able to do anything to, so you'll just have to avoid them while fighting the other guys who are hanging around. I do recommend opening up as many of the boxes, crates, or in this case skulls, as you can throughout the game to find all those extra hidden items. Like I said, I'm unsure of what some of them end up doing, but I do know they power you up in one way, shape, or form, sometimes in the form of more power to your attack, or speed ups, or other things. 5-3 introduces new enemies, the dragons. There are two different types of these dragon-headed guys. They either are standing straight up and they're easy to take out with a sword strike, or you'll have ones that are just moving along the ground, in which case you'll have to actually jump on top of them in order to destroy them. Pretty much from here on out in the game, I will be using the sword throughout most of it. The sword, of course, is not only more powerful, but gives me a longer range to my attacks. "5-4 has us in one of those more shrine-like areas, and we have those white guys with the unicorn horns, a variation of the ones we've been fighting. Also, we'll have to deal with one of the giant dragons. This thing works kinda similar to the big monster. Just like the monster, he chases you around and eventually will go off screen, allowing you to continue fighting the other normal enemies in the stage. Not too much special though overall to this level. In 6-1, I'll be getting out the sword like I have been. There are some volcanoes spread around here. They don't do anything yet, but in later levels they will have projectiles coming out. Introduced in this level is the teleporter enemies. These are some of the most annoying enemies in the game. It takes a lot of power to be able to even damage these guys, and unfortunately with our sword currently, we're not going to be able to even really do that. You can damage them by jumping on them, but it takes multiple jumps in order to defeat one, and by the time you're able to finally do that, you're just going to end up wasting a lot of time. Our goal, though, for the level, since we can't do that, is just to focus on the little disc with the mouths open. The teleporters, while they can't kill you with their projectiles, they instead turn you into a chicken for a short period of time. Yep, they actually end up turning you into a chicken. Now, one way you can defeat those teleporters, though, regardless of having the right power, is having the shurikens. So if you're able to find them in one of the areas spread out throughout that level, you can use them in order to defeat all of them. 6-2 has the giant monster in it, so be careful of him. It also has the introduction of the black spike ball enemies. These guys you can hit with your sword and they will bounce all around the screen. If they run into an enemy, though, they will defeat that enemy as well. Though here I'm able to find a pack of those shurikens and use them in order to take out all the enemies until the door ends up opening up. In 6-3, we have the floating demon heads, as well as the big guys with the spears that we actually haven't seen for quite a while in the game. Here I'm able to find another one of those hidden special items on the left side of the screen to help me out, and then it's back to battling them. Also locating the level is the guys with the horns on their head, but they shouldn't be too much of a threat with the sword. At this point in the game, I really try to focus on opening everything because I'm making sure that I have enough power to take out the final boss. (6-4) is a pretty tough level. You'll have two giant dragons moving around as well as two volcanoes in the center. They're spewing lava out to the left and right of them, and because of this you really can't go up the center of the screen easily. Thankfully, if you do have the shoes, you can walk up the water on the left and right sides. Get the shurikens if you can during this level and take out as many normal enemies until that door opens, and then as fast as you can, run to the door to avoid the dragons. We are down to the final 8 levels of the game. 7-1 has us battling the giant dragon heads and the small ones submerged under the ground. Here we'll be taking out the ones with the swords and jumping on the heads of the other ones. Thankfully, they throw a good amount of these guys at you, so you can get through the level pretty quick. (7-2) brings back the teleport guys, and unfortunately we're still unable to take these guys out. So, this is one of those levels where I take out as many of the little guys as I can until they stop spawning. Once those walking blocks stop spawning, I'm going to open up the bonus room and go down to the bonus room, and when I come back, the little guys will spawn back, giving me just enough in order to actually finish the level. One thing I haven't mentioned, if you take too much time on a particular screen, a flaming skull will appear and try to kill you. So you have to be careful of that. A lot of these games like this had little things that prevented you from wasting too much time on a particular screen. Like in Bubble Bobble, this thing will chase you down until it ends up destroying you. But in the case of it actually keeps staying on screen for a while, even after it's killed you once or twice. For the bonus rooms, we run around and collect the apples, giving us various different items, and the letter E's in order to try to build up some extra lives. Once the bonus room is over, we're back in the main level, and we can take out some more of the little guys until the gate opens up at the top. In 7-3, we have a big breakable wall in the center, as well as we have those big guys with the cannons they fire. Here I like to destroy the center wall, giving me more space to maneuver around. There's also the black spike balls that you can actually hit with a sword and bounce them into enemies if you need to. (7-4) is all dragons. It's a big open area, none of the little barrels or anything to hit. The big monster can also make an appearance, and there's no arrows in order for you to be able to escape him from, so this ends up being quite challenging. Adding to the challenge is 4 statues lining the top of the screen that fire projectiles on a consistent basis, giving you a little bit of time to maneuver in between them every time they end up firing. This is probably one of, if not the toughest stages in order to get through. Time for World 8, the final world of the game. The first level has a lot of cannons set up firing different projectiles, and you'll have the guys with bazookas as well as those guys with the horned helmets. Nothing too out of the ordinary for this part of the game. The only negative is for 8-1 and 2, there's no extra items for you to pick up. Thankfully, they do give us a few boxes to break in 8-3. (8-2) is another area with the teleporters. One cool thing is if you're still not strong enough, you can actually use the bouncing spike guys to take out some of the teleport guys. But if you're not strong enough to take these guys out yet, you may not be strong enough in order to face the final boss. Thankfully though, it doesn't take too many guys to defeat in order to move on to the next level. (8-3) has a couple of things to it. It has a special staircase you can get to appear early on, and it can actually warp you back to any previous level. This is useful for if you make it to the final boss and you end up losing all your lives because you're unable to destroy them, and you end up having to use a continue, which you can use in the game. You just have to hold down the buttons before you press start at the title screen. You can then go back to a previous level in the game without restarting the entire game to get those added power-ups you may need to actually battle the boss. As for the final boss, of course, you're going to want to use the sword, and he's huge. He takes up a lot of space, and he has a pretty tough hitbox. He'll stop every so often to fire out fireballs, and this will be a good opportunity to deliver a hit or two before quickly running away. Just try not to be in direct line of his walking so he doesn't walk directly into you. It doesn't take too many hits though for you to destroy him though, which is a big plus. Once he has been defeated though, go to the gate at the top, and you can sit back and enjoy the ending to Ninja Boy. So after a brief firework display and us saving the girl, we'll have the end go on, and you can press start and you can actually go on to the next level, which is 9-1, which is just going all the way back to level 1-1. It's tougher, and you don't get any of the power-ups that you had going into 8-4. But anyway guys, that'll wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.